Hello, my name is Taya Graham, and welcome to the Police Accountability Report. As I always try to make clear, this show has a single purpose, holding the politically powerful institution of policing accountable. And to do so, we don't just focus on the bad behavior of individual cops. Instead, we examine the system which makes bad policing possible. And today, we're going to achieve this goal by examining two examples of the theme we explore often on the show: the destructive consequences of American over-policing. First, by reporting on the arrest of a man seen here in this video, whose alleged crime was turning around when he spotted a cop, and then by reporting on the work of an international commission which is investigating police brutality in this country, which they believe is so exceptional it requires worldwide attention to fix. But before I get started, I want you watching to know that if you have evidence of police misconduct or brutality, please share it with us and we might be able to investigate. You can reach out to me directly at Taya's Baltimore on Twitter or Facebook, or you can email us privately at par@therealnews.com and share your evidence of police misconduct. And please don't forget to like and comment on our videos. We really do appreciate it and it helps. And I try to answer your questions when I can. Okay, that's out of the way. Now, as we've often reported on this show, there is a burgeoning problem affecting American law enforcement that does not get enough attention. It's an issue that some evidence suggests may be behind many of the troubling police encounters we report on. Sometimes we call this over-policing, but I think it's helpful to think of it from a different perspective: overcapacity. I mean, since we live in a crony capitalist society where the monetization of public problems seem to be the preferred form of governance, why not use the same lexicon to point out its flaws? Because in town after town we have covered across the country, one truism has emerged from the myriad of minor arrests for seemingly fictitious crimes we've recounted: there are just too many cops. And today we have a striking example of that thesis from Talking Rock, Georgia, a troubling video of the pursuit of a man who simply turned his car around when he spotted an officer parked on a road, a decision that has led to a prolonged legal battle and troubling consequences for the man who made the decision to reverse course. Now, it's worth noting that tensions between Georgia State troopers and the residents of Talking Rock in North Georgia had been high since the police-involved killing of John Harley Turner. He was shot on his own property by troopers after local hunters claimed he was threatening them. But then Turner was shot by the police on his own property just 45 minutes later. So tensions were high to say the least, and that's when Charles Spradling heard a trooper was staked out down the road from his house. He decided to drive to investigate, and now I'll let him tell us what happened next.
At the time, it was just a roadblock, and I was going down to see it because, having the neighbor tell me that she saw it is not the same as seeing it for yourself. And I wanted to be able to make sure that I could say, yes, on this date and time, there was indeed a police roadblock on our road. Now, our road is very rural, so it would be highly unlikely for the police to have a roadblock there. So it had to be related to the incident with my neighbor 5 months earlier.
And as you can see in this video, police pulled Spradling over, ordered him out of his car, and demanded to see his license. Let's listen to what happened next.
I have every legal right to go down the road.
Well, we're doing the road check there.
Yeah, no, I heard you were doing a road
Okay.
check. I heard you.
You got your license?
No, I do have my license.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Daniel, come here.
I went down there because my neighbors complained that there was a roadblock on our street. I went down to see what was going on.
Okay. He don't want to give me his license.
I live right here.
Okay. You might want to give me your license.
I'm not. No, I did not know. You know this place.
As you can see, police ultimately arrested Spradling, and since then, they have embroiled him in a protracted legal battle. But before I get to my interview with him, I wanted to check in with my reporting partner, Janis, to get some context on the case itself. Stephen, thank you for joining us.
Tay, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
First, as mentioned at the beginning of the show, the conflict originated with the shooting of a resident by a Georgia State trooper. What's the status of this case, and were any of the officers arrested?
Well, as far as I can tell from what I looked at, there was no investigation of the officers, no questioning of the officers. The shooting was immediately ruled justified. So, really, nothing was done. There was no aftermath or after action investigation or any sort of report posted online. It was pretty much considered to be an okay shooting, which is a little disturbing.
Now, there have been quite a few rulings about the constitutional rights to avoid speed traps or police checkpoints. Tell us a little about that.
Well, let me be clear. There is not a crime to turn around when you see a police checkpoint, nor is it probable cause to chase somebody or try to arrest them when they avoid a police checkpoint. What's interesting about that is that most of these cases revolve around DUI checkpoints. This clearly wasn't that at all. So why the police chased him and what probable cause or justification effort remains a mystery because they violated his Fourth Amendment rights clearly.
So, Stephen, finally, what are the police saying about Charles Spradling's case? How are they justifying the arrest in the light of the questions over its legality?
Well, to be honest, I haven't been able to get in touch with police about this, but it's clear the prosecutor dropped the charges almost immediately, showing that really there was really no basis or probable cause for this arrest or no reason for police to stop them. And it's clear from what I said before about the constitutionality of avoiding a police checkpoint, there was no basis for this. So the charges really were bogus.
And now, to get more on the details on what happened and the consequences for the person you're seeing in this video, I'm joined by the man himself, Charles Spradling. Charles, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me on the show.
Now, first, can you please explain to us the traffic stop that we are seeing in this video? What was their pretext for stopping you?
If you watch the video, and it depends on the time that you actually look at the video as to what the pretext is. Initially, the stop was allegedly, it was suspicious for me to turn around at the site of a checkpoint down the road. But when they found out later in the video that their sergeant told them that, well, he thinks it's okay to do that, then they started to come up with all sorts of other reasons, as you can clearly see in the video.
Now, you had good reason for not wanting to have a direct encounter with police, in particular the officers who slapped the cuffs on you. Can you tell us what he did to your neighbor?
The neighbor in question, who's called me about the roadblock, they live on the other side. Their son was 34 years old at the time, and he was a naturalist. You know, he loved the outdoors and that kind of stuff. Well, hunters and that tend to not mix. The hunters apparently were on his property. They were hunting. He yelled through the woods, told them to get off of his property, that he was, going to come down and shoot them if they didn't, basically. But it was through the woods. He didn't confront them face to face. Well, they left the property. They went and called the police. The police came out, and they immediately drew their weapons because the neighbor was wearing a chest holster with a .45 in it. They told him on his own property, put the weapon down, put the weapon down. Of course, he said, I have every right to have this weapon. I'm on my own property. I want to go to bed. Leave me alone. Just keep the trespassers off my property. Now, this went on for about 45 minutes. At one point, my neighbor even went back into his house and grabbed a gallon jug of water and a flashlight, came back out. Well, unbeknownst to him, while he was in the house, the police devised a plan to get him to come closer. So when he came out, the female deputy on scene had asked him if she could have a drink of his water that he was carrying in his gallon jug. So he started to approach the fence to give her that drink of water. Well, he didn't know, but two of the deputies had jumped over the fence onto their property and were hiding and wait for him. So when he got close enough to her to give her the water, then they opened fire with beanbag rounds at that point. And of course, he drew his weapon and fired back. He didn't shoot any of them, but they let loose over 100 rounds, end up killing him.
That seems like that didn't have to happen, that there was no need to escalate the encounter.
Well, I agree with that. The problem we have is that law enforcement don't see things the same way as the citizens do. They just don't. And they think that their word is to be obeyed under all circumstances, notwithstanding the law. And that's the problem.
Now, let's take another look at the video. You asked to see the supervisor and you were placed in the back, and the officers begin discussing what to do with you. What did they say to each other and during their call to their supervisor?
Well, keep in mind, at the time, I couldn't hear this. So I'm locked in the back of the cage with handcuffs on, and they're discussing, that it's perfectly okay, or he thinks it's okay to turn around at the checkpoint. So they need to find probable cause to have stopped me. So the first thing one of the troopers looks at is the tire, and he says that, well, you know, the tires are down to the wear bar.
Says we're violating his right. He's got a weapon in the car. But before I start going through and searching everything, I want to make sure that we were good. Since he turned around and went the opposite way. He's valid. So I know in Atlanta we'd chase all of them that turned around and ran. Yeah, he's requesting a supervisor, but I think we'll probably end up letting him go unless we find him. Or as of right now, I don't think we will.
So they bring up the window tint. You know, the window tint looks a little dark. That was 14 minutes, of course, after I had handcuffs put on me.
Did you give permission for the search of your car? In your estimation, were your civil rights violated? I mean, where do you think the officers crossed the line?
We were at that particular time. I was in the back of the car for 20 to 30 minutes before they finally come back and told me that I was, quote, officially under arrest. At that point, it was failure to display, obstruction of justice, and faulty tires. So they claimed my tires were unsafe. So I was taken to jail. I had to post about $2,700 in bond to get out of jail. So I was in jail for several hours until we worked that out. You know how easy that is on a Saturday afternoon after 4. They towed my car out of my driveway after searching it completely. They went to the glove box, my center console. They even ran the serial number on my firearm multiple times during the stop. I had a backpack in the back of the vehicle. They went completely through that. Ironically, they ended up giving my wife several of the possessions that were in the vehicle, including the firearm, but they refused to let her take the car the remaining distance up the driveway to the house. This was on Saturday, so on Monday morning, first thing I have to get up is go get my car. You got to pay cash. They don't accept credit cards when they're inbound, you know. So I drove down to get my car. From there, I drove over to my attorney's office. I explained to him pretty much what I've said here on this video, and his response to me was, "Okay, what else aren't you telling me?" You know, which was like, no, you know, that was really it. There was nothing I was hiding. So he arranged to have a preliminary hearing about 3 weeks from that date. The judge pretty much threw it all out. They dropped it like a hot potato.
Now, on this show, we've spoken a lot about overpolicing, in particular in rural America. Do you think this is an example of it, and is it really a problem?
I think we're overpolicing everywhere, unfortunately. I don't think it's just rural America. I think a lot of these big city police officers are running into problems inside the cities in some of these bigger departments, and they're coming out to the rural communities and they're bringing their problems with them. I think that's what's really going on. And, you know, we're just seeing it to where the power a police officer carries when he confronts somebody in the public is intoxicating. And they get so used to that. And they're so accustomed to people praising and worshiping everything that they do, that when somebody says, wait a minute, you can't do that, they don't know how to handle it.
So, how has this ordeal affected you? Can you talk a little bit about the personal toll for you?
I've never been one to suffer injustice lightly. It's always affected me pretty heavily. This just, it shocked me beyond the pale because I knew I had done nothing wrong. I was very careful that I don't, you know, have anything illegal. My insurance is up to date. My registration, everything is proper. I live that way. So when I was stopped, I was, you know, taken back a little bit. It's like why I was being stopped in the first place. I turned around. It was more than 1/8 of a mile before the checkpoint, so I wasn't even in the checkpoint, you know, region. But it took me back that, wow, if they can do this and what I have to go through to have my day in court that they like to tell you to go for, then what is a person who has the most minor infraction of registration that may not be properly typed, or there could be a typo or something doesn't perfectly match? What chance do they have? Like I said, in my case, I don't think they have anything they can come back on, and they're really struggling with that. In fact, right now, their story is that they arrested me from the very second they put the handcuffs on me. It was a full arrest, even though they denied it multiple times, both in the video and in the preliminary hearing. All of a sudden, they're changing their story now because they couldn't get past, I believe, pulling my wallet out of my back pocket with objection. So the police get to redefine their narrative, and they do it over and over again. And they know that we as citizens are going to have to spend thousands of dollars on legal fees to answer every one of their narratives. And if we do, then they'll just change it, and there goes another few $1,000s.
Now, the reason we report on cases like these week after week is twofold. One, we want to be helpful to hundreds of people who reach out to us for assistance when facing unfair or unjust law enforcement. And two, we want to apply the specific to the general, meaning we want to use these stories to paint a larger, more informed picture of the state of American policing. And nothing could be more exemplary of that idea than the case we just reported on, and by extension, a conference which took place a few weeks ago focused upon the use of force by American police. Keep in mind, American police use deadly force more often and with more lethal consequences than almost any other country on earth. For example, cops in Australia kill as many people in 30 years as American cops shoot in 1 month. Granted, the populations of both countries are quite disproportionate, but you get the idea. And it's our ongoing problem with the overuse of force that was the topic of an international commission specially created and impaneled to investigate and report on the use of deadly force in this country. The commission took testimony from lawyers, family members, and law enforcement officials who expressed concern about how many people die at the hands of cops. The panel examined controversial police killings like Tamir Rice, a 14-year-old boy who was shot and killed by Cleveland police while playing in a park with a toy gun, or Tyrone West, a Baltimore City resident who was beaten by police for nearly an hour after he made a U-turn, and Breonna Taylor, the young nurse who was killed during a botched drug raid last year. The point is that American law enforcement kills so many people in so many ways, and so often those same cops are rarely punished, that it has required an outside body to intervene. In other words, American-style policing is so extraordinarily brutal that in order to address it, we have to venture beyond the borders of the country, which allows it. But that's not where the excesses end, because this just released report by the investigative news site ProPublica exposed how deeply rooted all the aforementioned ills are embedded in our system of crony capitalism. The award-winning journalism organization analyzed the contracts of New Jersey police officers looking for perks that led to extraordinary payouts. The group found that police there received a whopping $492 million for unused sick leave over the past several years, payouts so generous that some officers collected hundreds of thousands of dollars each in unused sick leave. Now, let's remember that during the most recent negotiations over the COVID relief package, negotiators specifically excluded a clause that would have guaranteed sick leave to American workers. The measure was dropped after Republicans protested that the benefit would be too costly, and the Democrats failed to successfully craft and pass a bill that addresses the needs of an increasingly desperate electorate. Never mind, we were in the middle of a deadly pandemic, and never mind that this sick leave is essential to keep all of us healthy. But instead of affording a critical benefit to all of us, states like New Jersey have set aside $500 million in, wait for it, unused sick leave. That is, while denying grocery store workers, cab drivers, retailers a right to a basic and life-saving benefit, state officials have made sure that police can cash in their unused sick pay like a taxpayer-funded slush fund. In other words, cops get sick pay they don't need or use, and we, the people, get nothing. Considering this divide between the perks showered on police and the basic necessities denied the rest of us, is it any wonder we see stories like the one we featured in today's show? Is it surprising that police make bogus arrests and use force under questionable circumstances? Are we really shocked when cops enforce punitive laws without reasonable discretion, all of which results with more of us rotting away in jail? I think it's the divide between the pricey perks for them and very little for us that reveals the true imperative of American policing. How U.S. law enforcement has become a veritable Praetorian Guard, the for-rent soldiers who defended Roman emperors and their unfettered wealth for a price. They are better paid and better protected from the laws in ways not afforded to the rest of us. In exchange, they are tasked with enforcing economic inequality, not justice. They can cash out sick pay while we are forced to work during a pandemic because they perform the valuable service of enforcing all the social boundaries that make inequality possible. That, my friends, is why we continue to see law enforcement officers paid outrageous salaries and receive plenty of perks the rest of us will never get. And that is also why an international tribunal is actually forced to take on American law enforcement's catastrophic brutality while our own leaders stand back and watch. The truth is, American policing has evolved in ways that have little to do with public safety or service. Instead, it has become a self-serving institution that feeds at the trough of American excess, a job that has been transformed by the influence of rapacious crony capitalism into an enforcer of the inherent unfairness, which unfortunately engulfs us all. I would like to thank my guest, Charles Spradling, for sharing his story with us today. Thank you so much, Charles.
Thank you. I really, truly appreciate what you guys are doing out there, because I know it's somewhat of a thankless job, but it needs to be done. And you're fighting the fight along with everybody else. So thank you.
And of course, I have to thank intrepid reporter Stephen Janis for his writing, editing, research, and reporting on this piece. Thank you, Stephen.
Tay, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And I want you watching to know that if you have evidence of police misconduct or brutality, please reach out to us and we might be able to investigate for you. Please email us your tips privately at par@therealnews.com and share your evidence. You can also direct message me at Taya's Baltimore on Twitter or Facebook, or you can reach out to us through the Police Accountability Report Facebook page, Instagram page, and at Eyes on Police on Twitter. And please like, share, and comment on our videos. It really does help, and I'll answer your questions whenever I can. My name is Taya Graham, and I am your host of the Police Accountability Report. Please be safe out there.